Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Measure of a Man extended version. So in this video I cover the Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2 episode The Measure of a Man, but instead of just the episode I am covering the extended version of this episode. So for those who are not aware, on the Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2 Blu-ray, there is an extended version of The Measure of a Man. So, first of all, I have to call out a spoiler warning. Even if you've seen The Measure of a Man, but if you don't want the extended version spoiled for you, if you haven't gotten a Blu-ray yet, then you might not want to watch this video, as this video will be about diving into the extra scenes in the extended version and comparing the extended version to the original version. Now, this was a patron requested video, requested by patron Greg Marley. Thank you so much for your request and for all of your support. So, the first thing I'll say is how the when you go to watch the extended version on the Blu-ray, there's this text that plays that explains the origins of the extended cut, as they are aware, or the people who are remastering The Next Generation were made aware that there was a longer version of The Measure of a Man that was originally cut, that had to be cut down in order to fit the format of television, of the 45-minute episode. Now, this apparently was very atypical, which would probably explain why there's not any more of these extended versions of Next Generation episodes on the Blu-rays. In fact, usually, and this is something they talked about in Season 3 and Season 4, that usually episodes actually ran short, not long. And there was something known in Season 3 and 4 as pillar filler, because Michael Piller would have to write a extra scene in order to pad the runtime. And usually what they were saying is it wasn't actually filler, that the scene actually usually ended up being vital to the episode and really driving the character stories. So even though they called it pillar filler, it wasn't actually filler. But so usually it's the other way around. But in this case, Melinda Snodgrass commented, who wrote this episode, she commented on why she thought it was that this episode went longer when most episodes run short. And she thought it was because that it was written a very dialogue-heavy episode and a lot of talking, and so that actually took up more screen time than they anticipated. So the editors and director and the editor worked to cut the episode down so it could fit the TV format. So they tried to keep the essence of the story and keep it trim, but they gave several people, including Melinda Snodgrass, the writer of the episode, a VHS copy of the extended cut, and the people who were remastering Season 2 of Next Gen for Blu-ray for high definition were reached out to her, and she was gracious enough to lend them her VHS copy of the extended cut so that they could then use that as a guide to find the original footage to recreate it in high definition, and thus they included it on the Blu-ray. And this was actually shown in movie theaters, well, limited screening when Season 2 Blu-ray first came out. And I talked about before how I saw a couple episodes of Season 1 when the Season 1 Blu-ray first came out. I think it was Where No One Has Gone Before and Data Lore but that's when I was visiting America, because these screenings were in the United States. But I was living in New Zealand at the time, but I just so happened to be visiting the U.S. when the Season 1 Blu-ray came out. However, not such the case with Season 2 or Season 3. They stopped doing the movie screenings apparently after Season 3, which is a shame. But anyway, if I was there for the Season 2, then I would have saw the extended cut of The Measure of Man. Unfortunately, I didn't get the Blu-ray until just a couple months ago. So the Season 2 Blu-ray, I believe, came out almost 12 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. And so I'm sure there's many people who saw this cut a long time ago, or in many times, but I just got it, a bit behind in that regard. As most people were, I was just using streaming services to watch Star Trek until recently, because I'm finding streaming services to be highly unreliable, as any Prodigy fans will note, and they're getting worse. So I'm starting to invest more in physical media overall. That means Blu-rays, and I think that's actually a really good idea. If there's something I really want to be able to watch whenever and not be dependent on the whims of a streaming service, and it's better to have it on Blu-ray. Plus, it's great to have the high definition and the bonus features and all that. But so I'm just starting to get into that now. So that's why I'm a bit late. But anyway, Greg Marley had messaged me if I asked me if I heard about this extended cut of Measure of Man, and it was right before I got the Blu-ray for Christmas. So I was saying, well, I'm just about to get them, so I'll let you know. And then later, he messaged me again saying, why don't you just make a whole video about it? So that is what I'm doing now. So I'm going to save my conclusion of whether or not I like the extended cut better than the original version to the end of the video, because here's the thing, I could go either way with the extended cuts in general. There were several years ago where I did these Patreon only videos for my Patreon supporters, which I think at the time was like 4 people. It was like maybe 5 years ago or something. I did a series of videos where I did my top 3 favorite extended cuts, or director's cuts, whatever they prefer, and I did my top 3 least favorite extended cuts of movies. And so it could go either way for me. So there's my least favorites were Donnie Darko, The Butterfly Effect, and oh god, I can't remember what the other one was. But anyway, I hate those extended or director's cut. I only like the theatrical versions of those movies, which I went into details of why. Butterfly Effect is simply because the director's cut is freaking pretentious as fuck, and I think the studios were actually smart to make an ending that would made more sense. And kind of same with Donnie Darko. That it was too pretentious and tried to give too much away and expected the audience to do some reading while they're watching a movie. And I think the theatrical version was much better and much more ambiguous. And funny thing, the director thought that the extended version was... or the theatrical version was the incorrect version. It's not the right version, not my true vision. Well, I'm sorry, I like their true vision better than yours. Anyway, then on the other hand, I did my top 3 favorite extended versions. In this case, I would only watch the extended version and not the theatrical. I think the theatrical is an invalid version, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think, was at the top. The extended cuts, especially Return of the King, the theatrical cut is dead to me. Like, you gotta watch, if you're gonna watch Return of the King, it's blasphemy not to watch the extended version. And there's also Aliens, the James Cameron masterpiece, not that mediocre Ridley Scott film. Sorry. But anyway, yeah, the extended version of that is the superior version. I heard opinions that the scenes that were cut out of the extended version were cut out for a reason, and I'm like, yeah, they were. The reason is because the editor's stupid. Like those scenes made the movie so much better. And again, that's the only true version in my opinion. And then there's also Leon the Professional. And in this case, this is another case where the director said, "Oh, the theatrical version was my version. Those extra scenes were cut out for a reason. I don't really like the extended version." And in the case with Donnie Darko, but for opposite reasons, the director is wrong. And the extended version makes the movie so much better. Those scenes really add so much texture and flavor to the movie. It's ridiculous to watch it without them. So anyway, that was a huge aside to bring the point home that I will bring down my judgment on The Measure of Man at the end of this video. So let me get into some of the differences. For those who may not have seen it and don't mind being spoiled. So I'm not going to really review this episode because when I was watching this again, I was thinking about it and I was thinking of the same complaints I had about this episode, but I'm not going to get into that in this video because I've already reviewed this episode and I did a revisited for it, so I don't need to talk about it yet again. So I'm just going to talk about the difference between the extended and the original cut. So one of the main differences, the first thing I noticed at the start of the episode, was the character of Admiral Nakamura. Now, in my review, one of the complaints I had about the episode is Admiral Nakamura seemed superfluous. He seemed completely unnecessary. It's like, why do you even have him there? And that is the one big positive I will say about the extended version, because there's actually quite a few more scenes with him. Therefore, it justifies his existence. Whereas I think in the original cut, he kind of didn't need to be there at all. But here, they have an interesting scene. After Admiral Nakamura meets Picard and LaVoir and Maddox. He brings Maddox with him, but he meets Picard and LaVoir at the station, and there's an extra scene of them beaming onto the Enterprise, and Nakamura's kind of reminiscing with Picard when Picard was like an ensign and Nakamura was a lieutenant commander or something, and he was saying how he used to complain about admirals, but now he is an admiral, and they were having like all this chit-chat. And also, by the way, there's commentary for this extended cut, which I should have mentioned as well. That I also watched with Melinda Snodgrass, the writer of the episode, and Mike and Denise Okuda, and the commentary to talk about how Admiral Nakamura is kind of trying to have Picard put his guard down, kind of just being all chatty and friendly and ho 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 right before. Oh yeah, and by the way, here's this commander who's going to take your android from you. See ya, which is essentially what it was. And so I think this works a lot better in the extended cut. I think that scene does, while I get why it was cut because it's not entirely necessary to the episode, it certainly adds texture and does justify Nakamura's existence. And then that's not the only additional scene. We also get another scene, and by the way, there's a lot of scenes that are extended, which I can tell. Like, I can tell when there's new dialogue because I've seen this episode so many times, and it's sprinkled throughout the entire episode. And I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the added scenes because the extra, unless it's relevant, because the extra pieces of dialogue doesn't really change things that much. It's just more of it's just a longer way of saying things. But anyway, so there's another scene after Maddox says, "Oh well, data's being transferred to my command," and Picard calls Nakamura in his ready room because apparently Nakamura already fucked off. He already went somewhere else. So he calls him in that little computer laptop that he has in his ready room. And asks, is like, he's a valued officer of mine. Is there any way you can stop the transfer? And he's like, no, the transfer is done. It's a done deal, blah, blah, blah. Starfleet is the organization that we work for. And then he's like, and then Nakamura tells Picard, like, if you want to stop the transfer, that's easy. Tell Data to volunteer for the procedure. And so, the following scene is one that's in the episode where Data comes in and he sits down. Picard's like, I understand your concerns, but you gotta see Starfleet's way. They could have like tons of androids in Starfleet, whatever. And this scene was extended. They had a few extra bits of dialogue here that actually, I think, did change the dynamic of the scene. And it has a different context, this scene does now, because now you get the context that he's kind of, Nakamura almost convinced him, and he's trying to play devil's advocate and present Nakamura and Starfleet's perspective on this, which I don't think came off as strong without that clip of Nakamura talking to Picard. And yeah, it seems a bit more like Picard seems a bit more forcing Data or trying to push him towards doing this procedure, and Data seems more resistant than what came off in the original version. So then you have this other scene where Data goes to Geordi in engineering and gives him like the Watson pipe from the holodeck, Sherlock Holmes holodeck adventure thing. Which, you gotta remember, this episode came out very shortly after Elementary Dear Data. I guess it's before the Doyle estate got on Star Trek for using Sherlock Holmes without permission. But anyway, so yeah, he gives him that as a parting gift, and Geordi tries to play it down and be like, oh, Starfleet's one huge family, I'm sure you'll find someone else to play Watson, and Data says something that's, I think, very human, and that portrays that he's not just a thinking automaton, where he tells Geordi, he's like, no, no one could ever replace you. And I love that, and I think that adds flavor to the episode to show that sincere Data moment. Okay, so what else have we got? We have Data's going away party. So this was... This I don't think is not what I was referring to earlier, because I was referring to earlier some scenes where they extend it, where they add in a few bits of dialogue. With this, they add in like whole conversations. So this is like more than just a simple extended scene. They're adding in extra scenes within this scene. So I think it's different than just adding, like, there's a scene towards the end of the episode where Lavore says something like, well, boys, and then that's the only thing that's added. Where here it's a whole extra bit. So I'm going to talk about this for a bit. So in the original version, which you were probably aware of, there was a scene where Data they had a going away party for Data at 10 Forward, and Worf had given them a book, and it was wrapped in wrapping paper, and Data was very carefully unwrapping it, and Wesley is like, come on, Data, you gotta rip it off, and Data's like, well, if you do it just right, you can save the paper, and Wesley's like, but that's not the point, and he goes, what? So you remember that's in the original version, but they added to that. One of the things they added, which I thought was really nice, was a conversation between Data and Pulaski. Because Pulaski, this is still early in season 2 when Pulaski was being a bitch to Data, no sugarcoating that. But she had this really nice, sincere moment, and I think had they kept it in, it would have actually helped audiences like Pulaski more and saying, oh, no, she's not so bad. And so she has this conversation with Data where she's like, I would recommend going earthbound and doing some work there could be very rewarding for you. And that's, the kind of country doctor character Pulaski is. But she seemed to, like, be generally, like, concerned for Data and looking out for him and wanting him to learn and grow, which I think was really nice. And I think it's actually... in the original cut, Pulaski didn't really had a lot less to do, but she's the one who was like, "Oh, this is Data as an unthinking machine." But so I think it's nice that she doesn't take the side of Maddox, and this showcases that more when she has that conversation with him, sort of looking out for him. And you have the scene where Data goes to Geordi, and Geordi's all sad because Data's leaving. That's in the regular version. But then we go beyond that to where everyone's talking to Data, and he's like, "So what are you going to do next?" And he's like, "I don't know, I'm considering that." And then Maddox comes in, and... Oh, wait, before I get to Maddox, sorry, there's another part. See, they keep adding all these bits. Before I get to Maddox, there's a little scene with Riker and Troy as they're, like, sitting in a corner in 10 forward watching everyone else talk to Data, and they're just talking amongst themselves, and they're talking about Data. And Riker asks, what if Maddox is right? What if we're just anthropomorphizing? Sorry, I didn't get that word out. But what if we're just anthropomorphizing? Closer that time. Data, and he's not. He's really just a machine. He's really just this walking, talking calculator, and we're just projecting our own humanity. I believe it was actually Counselor Troy who said that. It's like, that's possible, maybe. Oh yeah, because Riker was asking Troy, is like, "Do you not feel anything from him? You don't sense anything?" And she's like, "No, but that doesn't really mean anything, because there's, many people that I don't really sense anything from." I was hoping they'd bring up the Ferengi, but didn't this time, because as I had already been mentioned that the Ferengis can't be read by Betazoids. But anyway, and then they said that Troy said the thing where maybe we're just anthropomorphizing him, and Riker's just like, "Well, that wouldn't be so bad," which is a pretty interesting conversation. I don't like it, because I kind of glad that one was cut, because first of all, they've known Data for over a year. This is kind of late in the game to be having this kind of conversation. I suppose it's relevant because of what's going on, but this is before, mind you, before the courtroom battle of is Data sentient or not? So I don't know, and I don't really like their conclusions that maybe we're just anthropomorphizing him. No, you should fucking know better by now. Now, granted, I'm coming in with the knowledge of 7 seasons where I know better. Maybe at this very start of the second season, the characters wouldn't know better, but still, I don't really like it. So then Maddox comes in. And he's like, "Oh, you're having a going away party, huh?" And Riker goes up, and "Yes, we are. And I don't remember inviting you." And he's like, "Oh, I had to see this for myself." And then he asks Data what he's going to do. And Data is like, "Well, maybe I'll do some teaching, because I've done very well with my pupil here, Wesley," and sort of pats Wesley on the shoulder. But that was interesting. That was interesting seeing that. But Maddox then decides to be a dick, and is like, "Well, I think you should be, go a carnival act and be like the talking calculator, the calculator carnival." And as soon as he says that, like, Worf steps forward, like, and approaches Maddox, like, all pissed off, and, chest panels, like, "What the fuck did you just say about my crew member?" And Riker sort of holds Worf back a bit. And it was just like, I can't remember what happens next, but I think he gets a call from Picard about meeting him in the transporter, and so he he takes Maddox and practically shoves them out the door, and it's like, you are, all right, I gotta go, and you're leaving, and like practically shoves them out the door. Now I'm of two minds of that scene, because I love the moment with Worf. I think that's great. I think that adds so much, that the sort of camaraderie that Worf and Data have, that he sees this guy come in and start being a dick to Data, and he's like, he's not having any of it. He's ready to kick this guy's ass. And I fucking love that. That's great. But on the other hand, I don't like the Maddox portrayal, because he's already a two-dimensional cartoon mustache twirly villain, which I talked about in my review. And this kind of makes it worse. This makes it even more two-dimensional. And mustache twirl, you should be a carnivalite. Twirl my mustache. And so that I don't like very much. But it might be worth it just for that Worf moment, though. That Worf moment was great. So, let's see what comes after that. So, yeah, so the next sort of extra scene is after they set the stakes of the trial, and Riker has to be the freaking lawyer. And that conversation, by the way, was extended a little bit as well, to add in extra bits of Riker sort of refusing to do it, and LeVar convincing him he had to, which is nice. Then we get a scene where Picard is fencing, which I believe at this stage the only time we've seen Picard fencing previous to this was in We'll Always Have Paris. And so it's interesting that they had this extra fencing scene that wasn't there originally. And by the way, they're not wearing the fucking helmets, in the fencing helmets. And We'll Always Have Paris, and in Iborg, when he was fencing with Guinan, they had the helmets that you're supposed to wear when you're fencing, so you don't fucking poke someone's eye out. They weren't wearing those, so they could have poked their eye out, whatever. But Picard was fencing some random guy. And in the commentary, they said it was originally supposed to be fencing Riker, but then they thought it might be better if Riker was just a bystander. And so Picard was just fencing with some random guy, and Riker came in and was like, well, you realize I'm going to have to try my best and to win. And Picard's like, oh, really? So you come here to warn me that you're going to do everything in your power to win the case. And he takes his fencing and like stabs the other guy. And I thought I heard him go, ooh! Like, he shouldn't be crying out in pain like that. But anyway, Picard wins the fencing match, and then goes, so will I! I did not like this scene. I'm glad that this one went. I think it adds to the cheese value. Now, if seen my review of Measured Man, you know that I wasn't a huge fan of Riker being the opposing attorney. I think that was stupid. Now, in the commentary, to be fair, Melinda Snodgrass explains that this was actually a practice in the military, and that she had a military, JAG officer explain that in certain situations they will have the first officer be the prosecutor and the captain be the defender. And I thought she made this shit up. I didn't realize that it was actually a thing, to be fair, but I still think it's stupid. I still don't like it for Starfleet and for Riker. It doesn't really make any sense. So this is so like, I'm going to win. No, I'm going to win. No, I thought that was stupid. Anyway, so then we get a scene where Picard is, interviewing Data, consulting him, and like preparing for the case. And, he asked Data, like, what about your record? Like, what was your career in Starfleet like? What did you do? And Data's like, well, the computer can just tell you this. And he's like, no, I want to hear your version of events. And so Data just starts spewing out facts. And Picard's like, Data, I can get all this information from the computer. And Data's like, didn't I just say that? Picard's like, no, I want to feel your opinion, your facts, why you did things and stuff like that. He wants to get to know Data and get into the heart of him. And Data was like, seemed perplexed, and he's like, for what purpose? And Picard says, yeah, eventually gets around to saying, I had to prove that you're sentient. And Data says, but I'm not sentient. And Picard's like, well, yeah, I mean, technically you're not sentient, but in legal terms is different than reality. And Data's confused. It's like, why is a law, you can't argue something that's not a fact. That doesn't make any sense. And Picard tries to explain that, and that the legal terms are different than what actual terms are. And Data says something to the effect of, I can understand why Shakespeare wrote "kill all the lawyers." I don't like this scene. I will say that flat out, because and I'm very glad they cut it, because you don't want to have Data saying, I'm not sentient. And especially in this episode. And even Picard agreeing, well, yeah, you're not sentient, but let's just say legally you are sentient, because that undermines the whole ending of the episode where it is ruled that Data is sentient. Now, it could be looked upon that this was a character change for Picard and Data, that they originally both thought, yeah, he's not sentient, but by they got to the end of it, they're like, actually, he's sentient. But that wasn't really earned, and so I wouldn't really get the sense that it was a character change. More of it would just kind of undercut, oh yeah, we'll say he's sentient, hint, hint, wink, wink, but he's not really, which I hated, because yes, Data's sentient, and this is a known fact that the rest of the show will play on, particularly when we get to the episode The Offspring, where it's acknowledged from Picard and this visiting admiral that, of course, Data is sentient. That's not even questioned anymore. And so I hate the fact that they're both being like, well, you're definitely not sentient. And this kind of goes along with the Riker and Troy scene as well, how they're saying, oh, maybe he's just this walking calculator and we're just implanting human feelings onto him. Which, again, that scene with Geordi and the thing, and the fact he has the medals and the fucking picture of Yar, that all contradicts that he's just a walking, talking calculator. He's clearly not. And that's the point of the episode. So I don't like... And I suppose it's supposed to be the main characters doubting themselves. Oh, maybe we're wrong. Maybe he's not sentient. And at the end saying, oh, he definitely is. But I think that undermines it. I think I like it better when the characters all along know that he's sentient, because the audience all along knows he's sentient. We always see Data acting in ways that are very human. And so for them to try to pretend like, oh, he's definitely not sentient, is kind of insincere and not consistent with what the show has been portraying of Data to this point. So I'm glad that stuff went. But other than that, I might be missing something, but other than that, it's just, as I said, like extended versions, like extra sentences thrown in here and there. So I will now pass judgment like the judge and pass my sentence on whether or not I like the extended version better than the original version, or if I like the original version. And my judgment is I like them both the same. I'm sorry. Bit of a cop-out. I was not going the way that I went with the movies, where I had clear, oh, this is way better and this is way worse. This one's kind of in the middle for me. I suppose I would lean more towards liking the original version better. Slightly. But I will say I'm kind of probably just impressed or very fascinated by seeing this extended version 30 or odd years after I've been watching this episode repeatedly and seen it so many times. And so 30 years later, finally getting to see these extra scenes is a real treat, regardless of what I think of them. So I'm kind of in awe about that. But I can ultimately say that the editors made the right choice. When they had this chunk that was too long, they need to cut it back to 45 minutes. What they cut the exact right things. I will say that. So it was good editing on the people that had to get it down. And so if you have to get it down, what do you cut? They made the right choices. because there was nothing that's actually in the original version. I thought, oh, that should have went, and this extended scene should have been kept in, which I do think for movies like Aliens, by the way. Like the scene with Newt going out with her parents and seeing the father get the face hugger, and freaking Ripley when she's on Earth, like hearing about her daughter and how she's like, because it's like 80 years later and her daughter like grew old and died in the time that she was in hibernation. Like, those are essential scenes. You could get rid of some of that other bullshit, but definitely keep those in. But there's nothing like this in with Measure of a Man. But that being said, it's not like I think the extended scenes detract from the episodes, with the exception of those two scenes I talked about where they were implying Data's not sentient. Those I'm glad went. I don't think they would ruin the episode, to be fair, not like the way the butterfly effect is ruined by that pretentious ending. But I think that they detract from the episode, that the episode is better without them than with them. But also the episode's better with the Nakamura scenes, because it makes that whole thing more interesting. It makes that character serve a purpose, which I don't think he does in the original cut. And even though I hate the Maddox mustache twirly, he does twirl his mustache enough already, so making him worse actually isn't that big of a deal. I actually think it's worth it to have that scene in there, because I love Worf coming up and like being like, what you fucking say about Data? Like, that was amazing. Maybe my favorite part of the whole extended cut. And I like the Pulaski conversation too, and I like the conversation Geordi had with Data about, the Watson thing. So yeah, it's kind of half and half, really. It's some of the extra scenes add to the episode where others detract. So that's why I say I'm kind of in the middle with I think they're both equally as good. It's just very fascinating to see this version after 30 years of watching this episode on repeat. So I'm not going to give a rating for the extended cut, because it's the same for my rating for the original version, which is 9 out of 10. So, and, the same reasons why I didn't give it a 10, 9 were applied from the original cut applied to the extended cut, so I'm not going to repeat myself. You can watch those reviews to find out why. So, that is it for my review of the extended version of A Measure of a Man. Thank you so much for Greg Marley for requesting this, and thank you so much for everyone who supports me on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel, so I will give a quick shout out to those that support me. So we got Antarius Tetson, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Michelaccio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal Howells. Thank you all so very, very much for your support, and if you would like to support my channel on Patreon, would be very much appreciated. There'll be a link in the description below, and there's different reward sets, different tiers. If you can't afford much, there's lower tiers, but there's more rewards for the higher tiers. So yeah, you can go to Patreon, check that out. I do a series of revisited, so if I come across an episode that I already reviewed, I'll do a revisited version exclusively for my Patreon supporters, so that is a big perk for that. So anyway, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation, covering Season 3 at the moment, but then getting into some poll winners, and then I'll be getting into Season 4. And I also do many other videos on Star Trek and many other shows as well, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.